A lipstick stain on a cigarette filter. That was it. That was the whole brand. Soft, delicate, built for women. And absolutely nobody cared. Then they replaced the lipstick with a cowboy. One man, one image. Dust, leather, and silence. And that single swap built one of the most arrogant, unstoppable empires in advertising. This is the story of Marlboro. How did a dying feminine cigarette become the deadliest symbol of masculinity ever sold? Marlboro launched in 1924, and from the very beginning it was built for women. The filter was tipped in red, designed to hide lipstick stains. The slogan, mild as May. It was soft, gentle, and completely harmless in every way that mattered in advertising. For 20 years, it barely moved. Marlboro wasn't failing dramatically. It was doing something worse. It was being ignored. It held less than 1% of the American cigarette market. It had no identity, no edge, no reason to exist. While Lucky Strike and Camel owned the market with rugged, masculine energy, sponsoring baseball, war heroes, and Hollywood actors, Marlboro sat quietly on the shelf, collecting dust. Then something happened that had nothing to do with marketing. In the early 1950s, science caught up with the cigarette industry. A landmark study published in 1950 by researchers Dahl and Hill drew a direct line between smoking and lung cancer. The American press picked it up. Reader's Digest ran a piece titled, "Cancer by the Carton." Panic spread through the industry almost overnight. Sales dropped. Smokers got nervous. And suddenly, men who had never considered a filtered cigarette in their lives started looking for one. A filter meant protection. Marlboro had a filter. For the first time in its history, the brand had an advantage. But it had a problem. No man was going to buy a cigarette with a lipstick tip. The red filter wasn't protection. It was an embarrassment. So they made a decision that would change advertising forever. They called Leo Burnett. Leo Burnett was one of the most powerful advertising minds of the 20th century. His agency, Leo Burnett Company, built some of the most iconic brand characters in history. Tony the Tiger, the Jolly Green Giant, the Pillsbury Doughboy. But what he did for Marlboro was different. This wasn't a mascot. This was a mythology. Burnett's brief was simple and almost impossible. Take a cigarette women bought and make men feel like it was made for them. Not just any men, the most masculine version of a man the American imagination could produce. His answer was the American West. Cowboys, open plains, horizon without end. A man alone with his horse, his cigarette, and his silence. No wife, no boss, no city. Just freedom. To complete the transformation, even the packaging changed. The soft, delicate box was replaced with the now iconic red and white hard flip top, the kind of box you could throw in a back pocket without thinking twice. And the red filter, the one men found embarrassing, was quietly reframed as a design choice, a signature. Something distinctive rather than something feminine. One of Burnett's early ads even featured a cowboy with a tattoo on his hand. In 1955, that was radical. A tattoo meant danger. It meant a past. It meant this was not a man who lived by other people's rules. There were no cities in these ads. No offices, no other people. Just the man, the horse, the land, and the sky. Burnett understood something deeply human, that the most powerful thing you can sell a man isn't a product. It's a version of himself he wishes he could be. The Marlboro Man wasn't a character. He was a fantasy. The fantasy of a man who answered to no one. And it worked immediately. Within a year of the campaign launching in 1955, Marlboro's sales increased by 5,000%. The brand went from less than 1% market share to the fourth best-selling cigarette in the country. By 1972, Marlboro became the best-selling cigarette on the planet, a position it would hold for decades. The ego of the campaign was breathtaking. Marlboro didn't just sell cigarettes, it sold an identity. It told every man who lit one that he was, in some small way, that cowboy. Free, rugged, untouchable, and men bought it, millions of them, for decades. Here is where the story turns. The Marlboro Man wasn't one man. He was many. Over the decades, Philip Morris, the company behind Marlboro, cycled through a series of real men to embody the icon. Ranchers, rodeo riders, real cowboys from the American West, not actors. Men chosen precisely because they didn't look like they were performing masculinity. They just lived it. That was deliberate. Burnett and Philip Morris knew that the moment the campaign felt staged, it was over. The whole power of the Marlboro Man was authenticity. He had to be real. The dirt on his boots had to be real. The cigarette had to look like his own. The most famous of them was Wayne McLaren. McLaren was everything the campaign needed. Rugged face, quiet strength. He looked like the West itself. For years, his image sold millions of cigarettes around the world. Billboards, magazines, the face of freedom, the face of masculinity. Then he was diagnosed with lung cancer. Before he died in 1992, McLaren became one of the most vocal anti-smoking advocates in the country. He didn't go quietly. He testified before state legislatures. He appeared in anti-smoking campaigns, his body now visibly ravaged by the disease. He even showed up at a Philip Morris shareholder meeting, thin, sick, and still fighting, and looked the board in the eye. He asked them to voluntarily limit cigarette advertising to children. They ignored him. He died at 51. He wasn't alone. David McLean, another man who had portrayed the Marlboro Man across dozens of campaigns, also died of lung cancer. His family later sued Philip Morris directly, claiming the company had known about the health risks for decades and deliberately hidden that information from the men whose faces they used to sell the product. Another Marlboro Man, Dick Hammer, died of emphysema. The men who built the myth of indestructible masculinity were being destroyed by the very product they made legendary. The irony wasn't subtle, it was brutal. By the 1990s, the world was changing around Marlboro. The lawsuits were piling up. Internal documents began surfacing. Documents showing that tobacco companies had known about the dangers of smoking for decades and had deliberately hidden that information from the public. The cover-up was enormous. The damage was generational. In 1998, the tobacco industry reached what became known as the Master Settlement Agreement with 46 U.S. states. Philip Morris and its competitors agreed to pay $206 billion over 25 years. They were banned from billboard advertising. The Marlboro Man, that dusty, silent icon, was legally removed from outdoor advertising in the United States forever. The cowboy had been put down, but the damage was already done. For over 4 decades, Marlboro had sold the most seductive lie in advertising history: that smoking was freedom, that it was masculinity, that it made you more of a man. Hundreds of thousands of men believed it and paid with their lives. The Marlboro Man is still one of the most studied campaigns in advertising history. Business schools teach it as a masterclass in brand identity, in repositioning, in the power of myth-making. And they're right. As a piece of marketing, it was flawless. Leo Burnett took a dying product with no audience and turned it into a global empire worth billions. By any measure of the craft, it was genius. But step back far enough and the full picture comes into focus. A cigarette built for women became the most powerful masculine symbol of the 20th century by selling men a version of freedom that was killing them. The cowboy rode off into the sunset. The men who played him didn't make it that far. That's not a marketing success story. That's a tragedy wearing a hat.